Hey, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending upon where you are in the world. I'm Scott Bogen, and with me today, as it shows across the bottom of the screen, is Kirk Dennison, and he is our new operations and product manager at Thunderworks Games. Welcome, Kirk.
Thank you, Scott.
You're
Super
welcome.
excited to be on board.
Yeah, well, we're all very excited to have you because your background is just bonkers. You've just done so much stuff and have so much experience in a lot of different areas. But before we get into that, I want to let people know that we are going to reward participation today. If you type in a question or two into the comments during the live interview, you will be entered immediately for a chance to win one of two of these little Thunderworks boxes. Now these boxes they're made out of wood, they're custom made, and they have a logo on both sides. Well, mine has my name on it, but yours will have a logo on the other side. And it's a place to store your bits, whatever you want. You can store your dice in there or whatever you want to store in there. And they're magnetic too, so they attach together really nicely. These happen to be what friends of Thunderworks Games, employees of Thunderworks Games, contractors of Thunderworks Games received for their holiday gift this past year. So you too can own one of these. We'll be giving away two of them, and I'll select two random names after this is all over with, and I can go through and do a proper sorting of the comments. So that's that. Anyways,
You can even fit a can in them if you wanted to make them an impromptu can holder. I've done that on my table.
I never thought of that. That's a cool idea. Coasters.
Yes, that's the word, coaster. I did. I was wrapping a present on the table for the holidays, and I was like, I don't want to knock over my flavored water. And I was like, what do I have? Oh, let me try this, and it fits.
Well, it's nice if you spill. You can drink right out of the. Drink right out of it.
I love finding the right use of objects. That's clearly the right use.
I feel like this has become an infomercial. You be throwing up a phone number, and you can order these now. We only have 10 available. Okay. Anyways, all right. So let's start this. Let's kind of talk about your history. I want to make sure we don't make this sound too much like it's a job interview. You already have the job, but we do want to make it somewhat interesting. What's your background in, Kirk? Talk about sort of what you did before you did anything to do with games.
That's a good question. So my career journey is all over the place, and it would maybe follow path of a younger generation who doesn't know what they want to do when they come out of college, and you just get a job and you do a job and you decide, oh, that's not for me, and then you do something else and you say that's not for you, and finally you slowly start to figure out what you like or don't like. And for me, that started with I got a job in healthcare. There's a large company in the Madison, Wisconsin area called Epic. If you're from the area, you're probably well familiar with them. They make electronic medical record software. They're one of the larger companies in that space. Prior to working there, I knew nothing about the company. They hired me out of college. That's how I moved to Wisconsin. So I was a transplant to Wisconsin for that job. That's how I landed in Wisconsin. And that's my first step into healthcare. I didn't really like working for that company in particular. I traveled a lot, but that's how I got into healthcare. And that led me down 7 more years after that, working in different healthcare related jobs. I developed an expertise in data analytics, specifically on healthcare side. Boring, I know. But anyways, I do like data and numbers. That's something that's always rang true in life. And I worked in healthcare and then finally decided, you know what? I really don't like being the face of American healthcare and everything that's wrong with it at family holidays. Because what would happen, true story, what would happen is someone would come up to me at Thanksgiving, someone I hadn't talked to, in a year since the last holidays, and they'd say, I went to the doctor last month and I had to pay this really large bill. Why was it so high? And because I worked in healthcare, I clearly knew why everything was wrong with it. And it wasn't a very fun thing to be the poster child for healthcare. So anyways, I was disenfranchised with that stuff and I wasn't connecting with the subject matter. I liked doing some of the tasks, but then I moved on and ended up working in an entirely unrelated industry for the last couple of years, staffing. That was a new one for me, helping people find jobs. And I could connect a little bit more with that particular type of job because you're helping people find jobs. That's great. But on the side, I've been working on board games for a number of years and then lo and behold, now I work in board games full time.
Well, I think your holiday gathering is about to become much more interesting for you and your guests. They have something maybe much more fun to talk about next time you gather together. But at some point during all of that, being at Epic and then being in staffing, healthcare, you decided to design a game, and that's actually kind of how I ended up meeting you for the first time. What was that game? What made you decide to, man, I've got this idea and I'm going to pursue it all the way to the end?
It was just really random, so I don't know exactly how the idea popped into my mind, but one day I decided, hey, there's no board game about Capture the Flag, and this would have been in April 2015. There's Stratego, and I love that game, but doesn't have a dynamic feel. It does feel like chess, and I do love that game, but so I decided I knew nothing about making board games, but I grabbed my Blocus or Blockus, however you call it, off the shelf, which just happens to be a large grid, and grabbed some tiny little pieces that happened to fit in the grid and started scribbling things on pieces of cards or paper and coming up with a game on the fly. The next day, I randomly was riding about an hour to visit family. My wife drove, and I was making this game in the passenger seat on the way there, and then conned a friend into playing it with me the next week and said, hey, I got this great game idea. And he was kind enough to be like, yeah, whatever. I mean, he didn't say that, but you know what I'm talking about. When someone has no idea what you're doing, and you just kind to a friend, and you're like,
right,
sure, we'll do this. But it was interesting. Went to a library in Middleton, coincidentally, on Old Stock Road, and we played in the children's book area. I think we were a little bit too loud and got some stares from random parents who were like, shh, we're reading books to our kids. That game became Flag Dash, which it was a thing, and I met Scott somehow through that. I don't know how we got it connected, but we ended up meeting and had a nice lunch and played the game, and you were kind enough to give us some exposure for our first Kickstarter, and you told me you kind of liked the game, I guess, just to make me feel good, even though you probably hated it.
I don't remember that comment, but
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Yeah. You gave me some kind remarks. I just wanted to make fun of myself.
Yeah, it was probably, I'm sure there was probably, did you know Keith Mateka at that time?
I did.
Already? So I'm sure that was a connection. He probably said I should interview you for the podcast.
That probably was what it was. But we met there. We had barely exchanged a message or two, and then we met there in person, and we hit it off just like old friends right from the beginning, and had a lot of common interests. And fast forward, we've done that same type of lunch gathering, not with COVID, but prior to COVID, quite a few times with different games. And
yeah, even just to get together to play games. I remember we played that game over at the taco place that one time. That was a memorable gathering, and we had such a good time. And anyways, it's good stuff. So at some point here, you made a decision to not just pitch the game. Maybe you did pitch the game. That's kind of what I wanted to ask you. Did you pitch that game to other publishers, or did you go straight to, I'm going to take this through from beginning to end as a publisher and publish this game?
It's a great question. So I went to Protospiel. If you're familiar, the audience, if you're familiar with Protospiel, it's a designer-focused convention. There are a number of cities that host that, and there's a great community in the Madison area. Thankfully, I was able to figure out quickly that Protospiel was a great place to go to in the first year that I was designing games, and went there, and I learned from a lot of people that they said it's really difficult to get a publisher to publish your game. If you really want to do it, self-publishing is the best way to bring it to market. And so my thought was, this is a pretty small project, and I don't want to wait around for 6 or 12 months to try pitching to publishers. I'm just going to do it. I have an entrepreneurial background. I didn't mention this. I started a business out of college with a number of classmates in a very different industry and a food quality. And we had licensed technology, won some awards, yada, yada. We did this, that, and the other. And that company no longer exists. But I have just an entrepreneurial background. I said, sure, this sounds great. I don't have any kids, and I like playing games, and this seems fun. So we decided to make it, and we brought it to Kickstarter in 2016 early.
Okay.
And then we were off to the races after that. I did 3 more campaigns after that. Gearworks, Rurik, Dawn of Kiev, and then the expansion for Rurik, Stone and Blade.
Yeah. So you apparently really enjoyed the experience the first time, and then you must have really enjoyed it the second time, et cetera, et cetera. What was your goal all along, to sort of become an independent publisher and sort of kind of break away from your other jobs and go full time? Were you trying to head in that direction, or did you always kind of want it to be kind of a side thing that you do as a kind of a hobby?
It's a great question. From the beginning, it was just more of a I have no idea what I'm doing, but this is fun and exciting. And so, for example, I have 4 kids now, but when you have no kids, your free time is, I mean, it's funny. You look back, I'm like, I had so much time. So I don't know. You're watching movies, you're playing games, you're running, or if you like exercise, whatever. You have lots of time. And I was like, this seems like a really fun hobby. I'm just going to do this. And after I made the first one, then we licensed it to a larger company, Ultra Pro. And at that point, then I said, maybe we could do a second one. And maybe the thought entered my mind. Maybe there's a way that this could be more than just a really fun hobby. So we started lining up projects to give it a true go. My wife and I, bless her heart, Emily was kind enough to give me an 18-month window. We had an agreement on this. It was kind of like pursuing my master's. I never went back for my master's. But some people, I use this logic, is that you work your day job, and some people go to night school in the evening because they want to pursue a different field, and you can't quit your day job, but you'd like to get tangible marketing ability to take another job. So I said, making board games now is going to be like my master's degree. I'm going to be working 20 to 35 hours per week on top of my day job for 18 months, and we'll just see what happens. So this 18-month run-up started in mid-2017. We released a game called Gearworks. We did a Kickstarter for that. It was like $45,000 in Kickstarter. And then we did Work, Dawn of Kiev, which is Stan Kardonsky's design, an amazing game, which was in July of 2018 was the Kickstarter. And after both those campaigns, we reevaluated the money. And we said, this is great. It puts some money in the college fund for our kids, but it isn't enough to provide for a family. I mean, you could look at the hourly wage, and it was kind of paltry. I mean, we made money, but it wasn't enough to quit the job. So at that point, August of 2018, we made the decision that it couldn't be, at least at that juncture, a full-time job, and we scaled way back. What ends up happening, though, is you sign yourself up for a lot of work that you get to do for the next months beyond that. So I couldn't unwind from it necessarily, but it was going from like 35 hours per week down to maybe 20, down to 10, and then you're kind of in maintenance mode with customer service for years.
Even now, right?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is somebody finds your game on a shelf for the first time they buy it, and they have a rules question or there's a broken piece, and you get to help those people, which is great.
Yeah, it's always new to somebody, almost whenever they enter that timeline. At some point, it's always new at a certain point. Publishing involves so many different skill sets, and as you approach that process yourself, which skill sets do you think you you excelled at kind of right from the get-go? Which ones did you struggle with, and were there some that you just pushed aside and gave somebody else to do?
It's a great question. I think I decided early on that there were some that you just couldn't get away from doing. Marketing is a good example, that if you're new and you have no established company, nobody's going to want to buy your game if you're not giving them a reason to want to buy your game. And so marketing is like a love-hate relationship for me. There's some days I'm like, this is super fun, and some days like, this is tiring, because the reality is, if you're staying up to 3 a.m. working on making board games, which is a very common night for me in the last 7 years, if you're running a demo after work the next day, after you stay up to 3, you get up and you start your day job at 8:30, and you work until 5, and then you go and do a demo at 6 p.m. Like, you're tired, and so it's like, if I'm being honest, I'd be like, I don't want to be a marketing face for the day, but I needed to. So that was one that I tried to get help whenever I could with marketing, just because I knew every day I can't be on to be the right marketing presence. Ones that I did like a lot were trying to figure out profitability, and so you can call it penny pinching if you want to look at it that way. But when you have you have a limited amount of funds to start with, you could spend your money all sorts of different ways, but trying to say, can I make a profit from this, or am I just spending money as a hobby, which is fine. Like, we went in debt, isn't the right word, but we had to borrow from our savings for Flag Dash. It took us a long time to actually make a little bit of money on that project. But then for our next project, I was able to budget a lot better for if we're going to make Gearworks, I don't want to make $0 from it. It doesn't have to make a lot of money, but I want to make it green. So that was a fun process where you look at it. So if you know all the inputs, if you know that you have to spend money on logistics items, freight, shipping, and your artwork costs this. So I thought that was really fun to be able to budget for things. I also like being able to find ways to save money. It's kind of like if you know you have to spend money, you're locked into spending it. But if you can find a shortcut to not pay as much money, it's almost like you just made money. It's the inverse. So a good example is that you know you have to ship the game to a different country, and you thought you had to pay $20 per game, but then you find out you can do something where it only costs you $15 per game, and for 100 games, you're like, wow, I just made $500. So I really like those type of things where it's like a mini game where you're given a series of information and you have to make the best possible decision.
That sort of brings us into logistics, and I know that is something that Keith and many other companies have really valued. Your experience with that, now everyone is intimately familiar with at least knowing just how messed up the shipping industry has been, you have ships going all over the place. You have airplanes, you have trains. I mean, it's really just everything. And then you have the manufacturing, and then you have the ports and containers sitting there, and the cost changing. I mean, there's so much involved with that, and then also communicating that to backers. How did you become involved in that? Because to someone like me who's more on the creative end of things and writing and designing and things like that, that sounds wild. And I know you said you had a pretty heavy analytics background and you enjoyed that numbers game. So I'm imagining, did that dovetail nicely into the logistics side of things for you?
Oh, definitely. It's a numbers game. So if you only have 100 orders to fulfill, any difference in shipping rates is nominal in your bottom line. But if you have 10,000 backers to work with, all of a sudden a $1 difference is substantial. So what I ended up doing was asking probably more questions than some other people in the industry knew how to answer, that people that I asked. And I just quickly realized that nobody likes doing this. It seemed like nobody liked doing this, and they would just press the easy button, and they would pay for a company to manage as many of the shipping, the freight, and logistics as possible. And what that meant is anytime you press an easy button, you might pay more money than you would have if you did some of the legwork yourself. And that's fair of anything in life. If you don't like doing something, you're just going to pay someone to do it. But I kind of liked doing it, and I could save a lot of money. So I dabbled with it more and became dangerous. And a few other people started hearing that, hey, Kirk actually does this instead of pressing the easy button. Maybe he can help you. And so then I started developing a reputation that I could be the guy for logistics. So I managed logistics for quite a few projects worldwide for Keith, and did some for Gabe Barrett and for Dan Kazmaier and for Corey Wright and some other people. And so I just I started pricing my services really low, where it was like a no-brainer for someone to work with me, just so I could get more tangible experience and do this. But what ended up happening is then I was developing long-term relationships with fulfillment companies and freight companies around the world, and those companies kind of continue to work with them to this day now on a weekly basis with a lot of different projects, and things snowball where you just become the guy in that space. So then I became the logistics guy in board games, which is very niche.
Yes, but very, very needed. And especially these last couple of years, it's been really important to know what you're doing in that environment. So is that sort of, I mean, obviously you created this, wonderful pile of experience. And did you, were you thinking about moving into the board game industry as a full-time job, sort of as you sort of gain more and more experience here? And did, it's funny, I don't even really know how you came to be at Thunderworks. I mean, I know you and Keith have been friends for a while. We've been friends for a while. Was it sort of like it just sort of happened that you started working for Thunderworks, or have you and Keith been talking for a while, or did Keith approach you suddenly and you were surprised, like, oh, holy cow, that's really cool? How did that go?
It's a great question. And I should add a pause here that a number of people ask questions, and I do see them on this side, and we will come to those questions in a little bit. So if you hang on here.
Yes, thank you.
Scott's a great interviewer, and he's got a train of thought. And I can derail conversations in a hurry to talk about black licorice or Legos or anything, but all humor.
Yes. In fact, yeah, we're saving the dessert for last. All of these questions are pretty interesting and
they are
a lot of
interesting.
fun. So,
and thanks for chiming in, by the way, those that are contributing. That's a great question, and I don't know how much Keith has shared about this with. I don't know anybody. I mean, I just know my side of the story. The weird thing with COVID is that I feel like you're in echo chamber sometimes where you don't even know who's listening just because you're in your house and
right.
Your audience is so much smaller. And anyways, I digress. I'd worked with Keith for 4 years now, ever since the Monsters and Minions campaign. So Monsters, Dual Powers, Lockup, Fiends and Familiars. Those are 4 prior to Role Player Adventures, Cartographer's Heroes, Lockup expansion.
Wow.
Cape May. So I've done 8 projects with him now on managing logistics. And so as time has gone on, that's been more and more work. And as I've had more kids, I've told him that this past year, I said, I can't keep doing this as a hobby anymore. But for those who don't know, I have 4 little kids, ages 5 and under, and 2 twins were born early this year by 3 months. It changed our life in June. Super happy to have them. But 4 little kids, 2 with health needs, meant that I can't keep doing a hobby job at the same time as a day job. So when I knew that the twins were coming, I told Keith early in the year, I said, I'm going to have to roll off of doing Thunderworks consulting after we finish the Role Player Adventures and Cartographer's Heroes projects. I'd signed up for those 2 years prior before those kids were even a twinkle in our eyes. We just had 2 kids, and I said, this is going to be a ton of work, but
right.
I can do it. So I'd signed up for those, and I wanted to keep good on my promise, so I stuck with those projects. And if you're familiar with those projects, there were a lot of products in both the Role Player Adventures and Cartographer's Heroes campaigns, a lot of backers. I think we did a good job of managing things, but then there was this whole logistics change in the world. Everything got way more expensive, way more complicated, and I realized I couldn't keep doing it. So I think for Keith, what happened was he knew I was doing more and more for Thunderworks, and his company is growing. And if I was leaving, then who's going to do all this? It's going to fall back on Keith or somebody else.
Yes.
So I think there became more and more of a use case of, well, if we're not hiring Kirk full time, we're going to hire somebody else, and why not Kirk? So our conversation evolved where he kept saying, okay, well, if you can't do this, how much can you do for me? And I said, Keith, I really can't do anything because if you have little kids, you're familiar with, you're already not getting a lot of sleep for changing diapers and things. So I basically, it wasn't an ultimatum, but I just said, realistically, at this stage in life, I can't continue to do much more than an hour here or there, not doing 10 or 15 hours a week like I was. So
sure.
It became a certain point where it was like, okay, we're either going all in or we're not doing this. And I decided to quit my job proactively in November to give the opportunity for things to play out. And then Keith and Claire decided, yeah, this makes sense. And then in December, we decided to make it official and work together.
Well, that's a super cool story, and it's kind of neat to look under the hood. And I hope people watching this are kind of enjoying that sort of inside look, hearing about information they normally wouldn't get. And so this really dovetails nicely into the boss's question. Keith Mateka asks, "What's your favorite Thunderworks game?" If you have a hard time putting that in perspective, just imagine that you're going to an island and you can only bring one Thunderworks title with you.
Ooh.
What are you bringing?
That is a great question. So if you've unlimited, so if I'm going to laminate, I would take Cartographers because I could not run out of map sheets there. That is tough. It's a toss-up. My wife and I
draw a map in the sand.
That's true. And I could come up with conch shells to make different things to fight. That or role player. The funny thing is, so a lot of people wanted a campaign aspect to role player, and I love role players puzzle. Mm-hmm. I like fantasy themed things. I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan, but that isn't what draws me to the game. Like some people are big D&D, and I didn't grow up on D&D, so that wasn't what sang to me from that game. I just love the optimization puzzle, and I actually prefer to play role player without any of the expansions, because what I find is that it distracts me from doing the puzzling that I like the most. I don't like the storytelling as much as some people do. I love the puzzle. Cool. So I like Cartographers a lot. I rate them both rather high. I think I rate them the same on Bogen Geek. I think I rate them both 8s out of 10. So I think I'll say both those.
Nice. That's super cool. And, our friend Nelson is asking Keith Mateka a question. Shouldn't you have asked that during the interview? So did he ask you that? Did he say, do you even like our games, Kirk?
Actually, over the years, we've had a lot of jokes back and forth about, we have some common interest in our games, but Keith and I do have some differences in interest, and so it's I've given him a hard time about games over the years that he should have published or this, that, or the other.
Sure.
You should ask him about his scratch and sniff game that Keith should have published a long time ago.
Nice. I'm intrigued.
It was just a running joke of, Keith, you should make a scratch and sniff game, and I don't know. Apparently, someone told me that there is an entry on Bogen Geek for a game years ago that did involve a scratch and sniff element.
Wow.
I don't remember the name of the game, but I just think it's kind of random.
This sounds more like a Kane Klinko game. No offense, Kane, but this sounds like a party game idea that maybe you can, have published in Target or something like that.
Yeah, actually, if anyone publishes that, I'd love to hear it. I haven't used a scratch and sniff sticker in quite some time, but
here's a good question. Kirk, are there any games you never got to make or publish under Peacekeeper Games that you hope might find new life at Thunderworks? Boy, that's a good question. I know you're not on as a designer specifically, but you've got their ears now. That's a great question.
Thanks, Harrison. And shout out to Harrison. He helped play test our expansion for Rurik. The timing of that was super fortuitous. No one knew COVID was coming, and we had a couple playtest groups running simultaneously in Madison, and we got the bulk of it done, and then COVID hit, and it was like I could not have scripted the timing better. So thank you, Harrison, for your help with that. Games that I didn't make, sure. So there's ideas are a dime a dozen. We got lucky that the very first idea I ever came up with actually became a workable game that became fun for some people, for me for sure, for Flag Dash. And then our second idea floundered for a while. So I came up with a few different ideas that never went anywhere. There's one game called Monster Market. I love the concept of it, that I could never make a fun game. There's another game, I'm going to blank on the name of it. I went through 3 game ideas in early 2017 in short order that seemed of interest. There was one called Pyromania that'd be fun to come back to at some point. Did you ever play test that one?
I played that with you over at your that place where you worked over by Costco, wherever that was.
Yeah, when I worked at Quartz. So that game, okay, if someone steals this game idea, I'm sorry. I'd at least like to be told later that I was an inspiration for it. This one, in my mind, is one of the most fun game concepts ever. Your whole point of the game is just to burn something, and you get rewarded for burning things. And so one person... And so it was kind of like a set collection game where one person was trying to burn old records and someone was trying to burn old books. And you were trying to do chain reaction fires and not let the fire get out of control. And if the police department was called, you lost. Funny story, it was based in a true story. I lived across the street from a fire department for 5 years, and I burned things in my backyard because why not? And one year... I burned all of our leaves, and it turned out great. I burned like 40 bags of leaves, not a joke, in a huge pit in our backyard, and no problems. So I burned them the next year. And of course, as luck would have it, the combination of moisture and air, within 5 minutes, all the leaves are burning. It took like 2 hours the prior year, and it had melted the side of my garage. True story. And my neighbors were about to call the fire department on me. I got it all put out. It was fine. But it was an expensive leaf burning, and I kept thinking about that and was starting to make a board game related to people that like to burn things, and if you get out of control, then you're in trouble. So that's one that would be fun to revisit at some point. I have no idea if maybe Keith played it. I don't know.
He did. Maybe. He was there. Yeah. He was there that day.
I couldn't ever make the gameplay become super fun, but I loved the concept of the game.
Yeah, me too. It's definitely. I was on board as soon as you had mentioned it. So. Here's a good question. Do you enjoy playing solo board games?
Mary, solo games. Great question. So I like playing solo games if the upkeep is rather limited, because, confession, I'd rather play an app game on my phone or a video game solo, because there are solo games usually, if it's going to be a lot of upkeep. So, for example, I love playing some really good board game apps. In particular, there's the Twice as Clever and the That's Pretty Clever board games. The apps are incredibly well done, and it's super easy to just press the button to roll the dice, and you can make all the decisions without... That game takes 5 minutes on the app in solo mode, and it takes 35 minutes with 2 players in person because there's all the dice rolling time. Love that game. So for solo, if it's a big immersive experience, so Rurik has an immersive solo mode. I did hire help for that because I knew that I wouldn't be able to get it across the finish line by myself. That's not something that I usually bark up the tree, but if it's something small, for example, the Gearworks solo mode, I do like playing that where there's a limited number of components in front of me and I can make the decisions rather quickly.
Sure. Cool. And we're, in terms of like participation in this today, if you missed it at the beginning, we're giving away a couple of these cool Thunderworks Games boxes that are magnetic. They're custom made. They have the Thunderworks logo on both sides. So yours will not say Scott Bogen on the other side, unless you just want to write it in with a Sharpie. We're giving,
Scott, you can do that for them.
yeah. Oh, love it. So we're giving away 2 of these. So if you just ask a question, you'll be entered to win one of 2 of these. So right now you have a really good chance of winning, looking at the number of questions here. So a couple of nice comments here. Congratulations on the twins from Nelson Rita. And John Godwin has noticed our Lego obsessions in our backgrounds. You've got the lovely Batmobile here, and I see looks like a Y-wing sticking out there.
Yes. So this was the holiday present that I got. I'm still kind of surprised my wife was willing to get on board with us buying this. Like usually it'd be just like Kirk just spends his money on whatever, but it was like, I'd like this for the holidays, and she acquiesced to my request. Funny story though, we accidentally bought 2. True story. So we're not getting a lot of sleep these days with the twins, and we'd agreed that this made sense, that, okay, this could be a holiday gift. And it was a decision who's going to buy it. And I thought I said I was going to buy it, and she said she was going to buy it. So I bought it. And then she bought it. And we bought it from a discount from a retailer in the UK. And we couldn't get the order canceled in time. So we got 2 of it at our house, and we couldn't return one easily because it was in a different country. So I had to sell one in Facebook Marketplace. It was a bit of a fiasco, but
that's funny. Yeah, they're fun. Legos are addicting. And if you don't know who John is, he's over on our Role Player Universe page, and he does a lot of great solo presentations live of all of our Thunderworks games. So we appreciate all the work that he does for us, and he's doing a great job. So thank you for that. Looking down, we got Dane Trimble. Hey, Kirk, love seeing you in this new position. Great fit. We've got
Thanks,
Harrison. Harrison, I think he was referring to the playtest help.
Yes.
Keith does remember playing Pyromania with us over at Quartz.
Yes. That was a different time of life. Yeah, we went through a lot. There was Dan Cunningham worked 2 blocks, not a joke. If you know Dan Cunningham he made Loon Architects, and he's done the trays for a lot of games. He did the trays for Gearworks, for Rurik and the Rurik expansion. He's done for a bunch of 11.99. He's done some for Cartographer's Heroes and Role Player Adventures. He's a very, very good eye for detail. Anyway, yes. So he would play lunch with me games, not necessarily just playtesting all the time. And then Keith worked and lived close enough by that he would come by sometimes, and you would come from Verona sometimes. Different season of life for sure.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and we try to throw in some lunch along the way too, which was just a good time. Jason has a question. Where do you think the most overlooked place for savings is in board game production? Love that question.
Most overlooked place for savings, specifically in the production side of things. Okay, I'm going to go on a flyer here. It's actually a hidden cost of production that most people don't tack on to production, and that is to factor in your end shipping plan at the time of manufacturing. And what I mean is that what we did was to pre-bubble wrap our games at the factory for Rurik and the Rurik expansion. And the cost for that was trivial compared to paying for the same level of protection at the logistics partners worldwide. You've probably seen that with some games that come pre-boxed from factories, and depending on how you accomplish that, you can save yourself a lot of money. But even bigger than that, there's a hidden cost of avoiding damages, and then also the customer experience of opening something that is heavily packaged. Even if it was damaged the most tiny amount, and I've experienced this as a customer, if I get a package and something is bubble wrapped and protected well, and I see a tiny little ding, I'm never going to contact the company because I'll say they did everything they could have done. It is what it is. But if it arrives from Amazon with no packaging material, which happens all the time, and there's a ding on the corner, then I look at it and go, well, this is clearly because of a lack of packaging material, and I might go back to Amazon. I don't, but I know some people would go back to Amazon and ask for a replacement on their board game or their Lego box or whatever. So I'd say that's kind of a hidden cost, is that you have to make the decision early enough that you can work with the manufacturer that will accommodate that. Some of them don't like to do that, especially if you ask for it last minute, but you can save yourself hundreds or thousands of dollars on packaging cost, plus save yourself cost on the replacement parts and the mailing.
Well, thanks, Kirk. This has been a great interview. We really appreciate all the questions and all your awesome answers. And wondering, is there anything that you were hoping I would ask, or hoping someone else would ask, or anything you want to mention that we didn't talk about before we close up shop here for the day?
Let me think on that here. Yeah, if you have other questions, feel free to chime in there. Legos are investment now. Nelson says, hold it for kids' college. You're right. I do have,
that's for sure.
I do have some Legos that I don't open that hopefully they'll be worth something someday. Other things you'd hope I'd ask. Good question. I guess you could have dove into other games that I like playing that aren't Thunderworks related, and what I'm maybe excited to.
Ooh, I like that one.
Suggest to Keith on a direction for the company. So Keith has a really great role player universe he's been developing, but there's the opportunity for alternate universes or other things. And so Keith has done years ago Bullfrogs, and then he did Blend Off. And there weren't ever other games that came off of those worlds yet.
Right.
And then Dual Powers. And then you have to fast forward all the way to Cape May, and now there's a new one coming out soon, if we mention 10 Penny Parks. So there's, I guess, an opportunity to chase certain worlds or whatever. And Keith and I have some different interests in I'm going to be the person who's going to suggest something wacky one of these times, and we'll see if Keith actually wants to go with it. I'm not saying like a game idea, but I'm talking like more like an IP direction. Sure. That so I've done the historical track with the Rurik Dawn of Kiev, which is Keith's done one historical game, Dual Powers, which is a great game.
Right.
Coincidentally, they're both based in a similar period of the world, so there is kind of a logical question of, is Thunderworks going to do more historical games in the future now that someone who's done Rurik and someone who's done Dual Powers are together? And I would say one thing that I've learned is that making historical games is really tricky to get it right. If you don't handle it with enough care and asking people that are involved in the cultures and the background, and you could make decisions that are not you wouldn't even know what you're stumbling into. So for example, as we made Rurik, and there was some controversies below the surface that I didn't know I was stepping into. So you have to handle it with care. And Keith and I've talked this, so making up a universe like role player is so much easier because you're not hurting someone's feelings because it's based on something that didn't exist before.
Right. Interesting. Here's a good question here from Harrison. If Thunderworks got to work with a popular IP outside of board games, which would you most want to work with? Wow. That's tough.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah. Well, I hear Winnie the Pooh is finally public domain. So the Winnie the Pooh RPG game. There we go.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about. So there's some that are probably off the table is because they have really established partnerships for things like Star Wars and superheroes. I think that doing something kind of off the wall, like my kids, for example, are liking Where's Waldo. Like there's just some really unique IPs that I actually thought, oh, how would Where's Waldo look as a board game?
Right.
And I was thinking about the new game that came out recently, the Crime City Macro Micro. Maybe it's that type of thing's already taken because it looks kind of like Where's Waldo there. Winnie the Pooh cartographers.
There you go.
So there's some niche categories. Okay, Sonic the Hedgehog would be pretty cool for a board game. I don't know if there are any good Sonic games, for example.
Yeah.
Or Donkey Kong. That would be pretty awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a sci-fi fan, but Keith isn't. So I think like maybe Isaac Asimov, like his Foundation series, there's something in there. Might be kind of juicy. Yeah, cool. That's fun to think about. 100-acre woods map. Exactly. That's exactly what I thought when you said.
And actually,
cartographers like
this year,
cool.
Winnie the Pooh is now public domain as of this year. So there we go. We can just straight up make it.
Right. I love Cape May. I love it too. I hope it gets the recognition it deserves. Do you think it would have more hype if it went to Kickstarter or GameFound? That's always a good. It's always a good question.
In a vacuum, I think that any game that has more marketing attention up front stands a chance to do better. I think it's more of just a competing priority. The two largest Kickstarters that Thunderworks had ever done, actually, Fiends was a bigger dollar amount than Cartographers, but as far as backer count, it was higher. So two of the biggest projects were done the same year. So to take a third game to Kickstarter in the midst of that just wouldn't have been possible.
Right.
But I'd say it's one of the most beautiful games in my collection. When I got my copy and held it, I've stared at the artwork for a long time, and I just held that box like, man, this box pops. And I think that does really well for the game.
Yeah, it does. And then, I'm seeing a lot of positive feedback. It might be, it's doing fine. It's doing well, Keith says, and the numbers are good. And, it might be one of those games that just continues to grow, as more and more people play it and see its beautiful presentation as well on top of it. So, well, I know you have something coming up here soon at the top of the hour, some other obligations. So we'll wrap things up, and really appreciate you being here with us today, Kirk. It's so great to be working with you officially. I can now bother you for those pesky little Facebook ad placement questions that I often have, that I was like texting you while you were at work. And now you're going to be working at Thunderworks, so now you kind of have to answer me right away. Just kidding.
That's true. There is a question from Stephen there.
See, well, that one just popped.
Sorry, Stephen. Yes. That's a great question.
If you don't have logistics, marketing, and creative skills, but you love board games, how do you get started in the industry?
So I gave this primer to somebody else who was at a decision-making point in their career where they were wanting to explore board games but didn't know where to start. There's a lot of hidden opportunities. So you can think about, this is a consumer good. There are so many ways that consumer goods get created and sold. So, for example, you could work at a local game store. That's one thing. Now, maybe you don't like working retail, and that's probably the main reason people don't sign up for that one, is that they might not want to work on weeknights and weekends. There's that. You've also got the opportunity to do more of a customer support on the back end, which could be at any level. You could do customer support for consumers, for retailers, for other companies in this space. There is the opportunity to also do writing. Now, you mentioned not having creative skills, but you could have an analytical mind to evaluate writing for consistency and tone. That doesn't necessarily have to be a creative skill. So editing is a pretty logical space to start doing some freelance work. A lot of companies need more eyes. If you like playing games, there's always opportunities to play test. Now, that's difficult to get in, but you can start getting some paid playtesting or development opportunities if you prove the value you offer is helpful. The other things you can do would be to do financial things. So a lot of companies don't do enough budgeting and then retroactive profitability analysis. I've long said to several other people looking to get in that if you could provide a consistent way for creators to help them with their finances, just to provide an outside counsel, there's a lot of companies that would love to have a second set of eyes or someone that would help them measure their true cost of if they're making money or not. So those are hopefully a couple ideas that might jog some thoughts.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining me today and talking about your background and your love for games. And we'll talk to you soon, Kirk.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on, Scott. And
all
thanks
right.
all for paying attention.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone, for your questions. Bye.
Have a great day.